everyone, happy Wednesday. I hope you all are having a great week. If it's not so great right now, I hope it turns around for you today. So today we are talking about author bookkeeping, and bookkeeping at its most basic is just the act of keeping accurate records of your financial transactions related to your authorship. So whether you are required to have an LLC or some kind of sole proprietorship through your state. I know Virginia's a little weird, so I'm glad I'm in West Virginia. But whatever you're doing, it's really important as you're going through your authorship to keep records so that come tax time, you're ready. One thing I hate doing, and I actually ended up doing it last year, was I was rushing at the last minute to go through all of my bank statements and through my PayPal and tracking down all these expenses. And I was like, my accountant did give me this little booklet, like he gave me a couple of them a couple years ago, and he says, track your business expenses with this. And I was like, oh, that's cute. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. And then they're tiny little booklets, so I lost them. And so it came down to, tax time, and I had to rush around in order to find all of my expenses and my income for the year. So it was really, really annoying, really inefficient. And, I found afterward there were some things that I had missed. And so I said there has to be a better way to do that. And it really did help me, though, that while I was creating back in November of last year, I created the 2018 Author's Journal, and what that did was give you a whole section just to track your expenses month by month. So it's not just like open blank pages, it is based on the month, which I find really helpful, so that I know the date, easily know the date which it was incurred, the expense was incurred, or whatever. But it's all in one spot with all of my stuff, so I don't have to lose it. And it doesn't get lost, doesn't get misplaced, because this thing is huge, you know what I mean? So it's really hard to lose this. But anyway, so let's go ahead and get started real quick. And I just wanted to share this with you guys. I just went through catching up on my accounting, or my bookkeeping rather, and it was an ordeal. It took several hours because I hadn't tracked anything since April, and then I found out I was missing some expenses recorded in March. And so I said, I do better than this. It's normally part of my monthly maintenance, and I just kept getting overwhelmed with things. So it's actually in my planner now that the last Sunday of every month is when I go back through my PayPal, my bank statements, any kind of credit card. I check with my husband and make sure he didn't spend anything on my authorship. But I go back through and track my expenses and enter them, record them, and make sure that I can have easy access to the record in case my accountant wants to verify. So anyway, so let's start with, the purpose of this is to help you stay on track with your finances, make sure you're actually having a good financial picture of what it takes to run your authorship, as well as being ready for tax time. So I hope you all are ready for this. It sounds boring, but it's really important stuff, and it helps us get on top of the business side of being an author, which I think we all know now that's one of the hardest parts of being an author is, we can write, we've got the passion to write, but do we have the passion to treat it like a business? That's the scary part, and a lot of times what we have to learn step by step as we walk along our journey. So what do we track? So I've covered that we want to keep track of things. That's what bookkeeping is. It's keeping accurate records of financial activity. So what are we going to track from our authorship? What kind of expenses? Any expenses relating to drafting. Hey, Regina. So this could be Scrivener. Scrivener is an expense that's related to your authorship. So write it down. And I'm not saying all of these can be claimed on your taxes, but that's for your accountant to decide. Your accountant, and hopefully you're working with a CPA, because, as so I did taxes. I was certified by the IRS to do mid-level taxes and or intermediate taxes, and I work with a CPA because it's actually, I have more faith and confidence than I would going to a box store, and I'm paying about the same thing. So I know my mom goes typically to H&R Block or something, even though I always offer to help her do like TurboTax or something. But she says, no, I'll have H&R Block do it because they can get your money back faster, which it's really not that bad from the federal government anymore. But she ends up paying a lot more than for me to go to a CPA. So it really doesn't make sense not to. That's my argument for that. But anyway, I'll move on. So the point is to keep track of all your expenses and then give them to your tax person at the end of the year when you go to do your taxes, or I guess after the end of the year. But during tax season, just give all of your expenses month by month, and of course, try to make it easy for them. Cuddle. I don't know why I said cuddle. I think I need to see my husband. But kind of categorize things, not cuddle things, categorize things together. So you can say, okay, I spent this much on software, and here's the breakdown, Scrivener and Vellum and whatever. And then, you can say, I spent this much on polishing my manuscript. We can put editing in there, revisions, and if you have to pay for revisions. And formatting and proofreading and cover design, that kind of ordering proofs. That is something you should be tracking. That is an expense related to running your authorship that you should be, keeping record of, measuring. So anyway, drafting, when you're drafting that manuscript real quick, there was one thing I didn't mention. Any writing classes you're taking, this is related to improving your specialty in a business. So if you were an architect, if you had to take classes to learn, something or to refresh your skills, or if you're a nurse and you had to stay up on your license, and demonstrate your skills, then that's a class that you can potentially claim on your taxes. That is an expense related to your business of authorship. So any writing classes you do, I really love the ones from Writer's Digest. I guess they're expensive for some people, but at the same time, I think it's really worth it. I think they hire really fantastic instructors. But anyway, but the point is, any classes you take for writing, that if you have to pay for that, that's an expense that you should be keeping track of to give to your tax person at the end of the year. But yes, Scrivener, any software you use to write that you have to pay for, any classes, anything related to the drafting process that costs you money, keep record of it, when you incurred it, what you incurred it for, like what's the reason, what part of your business does it support. Again, it's the drafting of the novel, or your manuscript, and whether you write novels or plays or whatever. So anyway, but anything related to that, just keep track of it and then bring it to your accountant. I put in the planner, I said, keep all your records and keep all your expenses and let the accountant sort them out, like a funny military saying. Anyway, so publishing, what kind of expenses do we see when we're publishing? Well, the first thing we see typically, and not always, if you go solo with Amazon, you won't see this, but in ISBNs cost money. So when you purchase those, hopefully you do like a 10-pack if you can do that, because that saves you money. It's $125 for one or $295 for 10. So I used my tax money from last year. I saved it up for that, for purchasing a 10-pack of ISBNs. But that is an expense that you should be keeping track of. Another one, costs for any help with publishing. So if you're really not techie and you need help publishing, or you go through some kind of hybrid publisher, or whatever the case is, if there are other costs related to the publishing process, you should be keeping track of those. Date, what it's related to, who the provider was. You should be keeping clear financial records of all of this in one place. And then marketing. This is where the expenses definitely get, we would get a lot more of these expenses. Any kind of money you spend to send copies to influencers or reviewers, you should absolutely be keeping track of those. That's a marketing expense. Copies, paid promos or giveaways. If you're doing a giveaway of your book, you should be keeping track of the expenses related to that. Whether it's a signed copy with a reader gift pack, or just a signed copy and you got to ship it, all of those costs, including the shipping, that's an expense related to the marketing of your work, especially when it's with giveaways. Any gift cards, if you throw a virtual party to celebrate the launch of your book. Any expense related to that, whether it's giveaways or gift cards or whatever the case may be, keep track of all of those expenses. And it sounds like a lot of work, and yeah, it can be, but you really need to keep track of this stuff. And if you don't do it right away, you get to the point where you're like, oh, what did I do at that party? How many gift cards did I give away? And you have to dig into things, and it's so much easier just to do it right when it happens than to go back later and do it. But all of these expenses you should be bringing to your accountant. Let's see, any paid promos, so you can do like Fiverr and get a shout out or a feature, or like you could pay for newsletter features and things like that. That stuff absolutely should be recorded as an expense related to the marketing of your work. Of course, any social media shout outs, if you're doing like a Fiverr social media shout out, any advertising, whether that's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, or ads on Amazon or BookBub, that should be recorded, as soon as you have that cumulative spend data. And of course, just keep track of the start date for your ads and the end date for the ads. And if you have ongoing ads, just, keep track of what that monthly advertising expense is. Many of us do have ongoing ads, yes. But we definitely want to say, okay, this month I spent how much in advertising, which is really easy. One reason I have gone back and forth between weekly maintenance and recording my expenses and weekly and monthly maintenance with recording these expenses is because Facebook actually, at the beginning of a new month or the end of a month, it charges your account for your ads. So that means, I know for sure what that Facebook charge is on my bank account when I go and look through my expenses. So that's really easy to see. Now, another marketing expense that you may incur, the virtual parties like I mentioned, but also any offline event, any kind of, copies you get of your book to bring with you, or the supplies or your banners or, your goodies, your table goodies, your table, anything you need to set up at a physical event, you should absolutely be recording that expense when it was incurred. And then let's see. Can anyone else think of any expenses that I haven't mentioned? I think I pretty much covered everything from software, classes. I think another thing I would mention is if you're in the ATA, you should be keeping track of, yes, monthly, I spend this much to be a member of the ATA, which provides me business training and authorship training, marketing training, so that, I can be better at being an author and treating it like a business. So that expense, that monthly membership expense, should absolutely be, brought to your accountant. So if you bought any of Mark Dawson's courses, definitely bring that expense. Any courses that you purchase, bring that to them. Yes, travel. Keep detailed records of your travel, because there's mileage considerations. There's all sorts of kind of stuff. Conferences, I guess that's one I didn't bring up. I would bring that to your accountant because it is business related. If you're going to like a writer's conference or anything like that, that's related to the nature of your business. So I would bring that to your accountant and make sure you have detailed records of those accounting expenses. Of those travel expenses and any conference expenses and things like that. Meals away. I think there's so much you can claim for that. But again, it's like keep it all and let the accountant sort it out, what you can claim and can't. So it's really easiest that way, and it's definitely worth it. So conferences, travel. Is that Anne? Hi, Anne. So let me know what you guys think. Are there any other expenses that we haven't covered here? Again, we've done software, proofreading if you pay for proofreading, editing if you do to editors, any kind of events, whether online or offline, buying copies of your book, buying proofs of your book. That's an expense related to running your business. And it's absolutely, I think, a necessary one. But so let's see. Regina says, what would it take to turn a common event into something you can claim a writing expense for? Go ahead and please give me an example so that I can provide an accurate response for. Hi, Delilah. How are you? So definitely, we have some great examples of different expenses that you can claim, or at least bring to your accountant, and then they can decide what you can claim and what you can't. And typically, what you want to do anyway is, if it's possible, you want to be able to have your expenses come in, a little bit under your income. And I know for many people it's the reverse, where your expenses far outweigh your income, but when you're back in the black, that accounting language, but when you're back in the black, then you want to be able to let the federal government tax some of your income. So, you don't always want to, be at a loss, because then the government's going to want to investigate that and say, why do you keep losing money? But when you are there, when you have you're at a place where you do have a pretty good income, tell your accountant, hey, let's let the federal government tax some of my income. So we won't claim everything. We'll claim just enough to make it, not that terrible, not a loss, and let them tax something, let them get there a little bit. Let's see. Regina says, I went out. I have to like it before I can see it. I really hate this new search function, or this chat function. Let me see here. Okay, so let me see, Regina. I can just pull it up here. Let's see. And okay, if I went out with my family to a museum, if I did research while I was there, would the trip then be a writing expense? I think it has to be the primary purpose, but what I would do is, if it is research related to drafting your novel, I would write that down and bring it to your accountant. That is the best bet there. You can say, hey, and just put a note next to weird expenses like that, museum trip for research, and say, hey, I had to do research for my novel, and I had to do this research, so I went to this museum which had this great exhibit, what I needed to research, and hey, guess what? Let's see here. Let's see. Okay, Anne says, since you're talking about expenses, I Googled what percentages are standard for an author type of business. The best I found is 35% of your sales. Of course, you're probably losing money for the first 35 years, but it is a good factor to keep in mind and help you tailor your expenses. Yep, and that figure is definitely going to vary. I think that's kind of what's supposed to be a typical for someone who isn't in the early stages of hitting that kind of success where they're, making a profit. So, there's this fantastic book that anyone who is interested in really treating this like a business and making sure that you get to a point where you're making money, you're working on craft, you're working on, marketing and stuff like that. If you want to get into the internals of the business and the money side of things, read Profit First. Profit First is absolutely fantastic, and it really helps you get a hold of your finances in your author business or whatever business you're in. But it really blew my mind, and it helped me look at my finances in a different way that really helped me just shift to make sure that I'm making a profit this year, and I love it. It is limiting expenses, and it helps me put a cap on that in a way I can say, okay, this month I can hire some extra help, and this month I cannot. Especially the month I bought the ISBNs. I was like, nope, I can't hire extra help this month because I spent that extra money on the ISBNs. So Adrienne says, hi, great topic today. I need this. Yes, definitely go ahead and watch it from the beginning. You should be able to watch it pretty soon after we're finished here. But, the most important thing is that read Profit First before you get into any setting a 35% cap on expenses. I think that is really dependent on where you are in the process. I know many people who are at a big loss, year to year. And yes, and once it's a hobby, there are, limits to what you can claim on your taxes. But that's why we record all of our expenses and then hand it to the accountant and let them do their magic. That's their job. That's their expertise. And I don't think we should try to do brain surgery on financials, especially when it comes to the federal or state government. That's kind of stuff you can go to jail for. So that's why I love accountants, because then they sign their name on it and they get to be responsible for it. So, Okay, so I just needed my coffee. But anyway, so definitely just keep track of everything, no matter how many years you've been at a loss, if you've been, claiming it on taxes. But the point is, you keep track of your software, you keep track of, like whether it's Scrivener or Vellum, keep track of those receipts and those expenses, keep track of your proofreading, your editing, your formatting expenses, your cover design. And like if you have to test out different illustrators, if you're, doing like a sci-fi or an epic fantasy and you need the right illustrator to get the job done, if you have to do samples with those different people, those samples should count. You should be recording those expenses for those samples. So your cover, anything. Anne says, not really a cap, but it's just something to shoot for, so you're not going willy-nilly, I think. Yeah, absolutely. That'd be great to shoot for. I think for any business, that'd be pretty amazing to only have 35%. But, as an author, when you're, treating it like a business, if you really shouldn't have a high overhead. You shouldn't have much of an employee cost. So you should be like using contractors if you have someone doing your social media or being your personal assistant. But that is, definitely a different realm. But let's see, books you read. Yeah, books on business, books on the craft, books on, any kind of genre, or books in your genre, I guess, if you're doing research or learning the market, something like that, that could be helpful too. So I don't claim my Audible, even though it is mostly business books that I buy on Audible. That's not something I've really claimed yet, but I guess I've done pretty well at keeping my expenses. Like for what I do with the ATA, I can claim my phone bill, which is what my accountant actually suggested, because I do use my phone for business. So if you used your phone for business or something like that, then you could. Another thing I can claim, according to my accountant, your accountant may be different, but my accountant has me claim my internet because I need it for work. Hi, Amy, how are you? So definitely, look into some of these things, keep track of them, keep track of all these things you need to run your authorship like a business, and claim, and just bring it to your accountant. So that way, at least you tracked everything, but, they decide what you claim. Now let me show you an example real quick, guys, of how I track my expenses after having, knowing that 2018 tax season was going to be a mess for me. And so when I created the 2018 Author's Journal, I knew that I needed a section where I could keep my expenses and not struggle to keep up with everything or lose whatever, tiny. I thought, I'll get a cute little journal and keep my expenses in there. It'll be just a journal for expenses, and it'll be pretty and hardcover, and I'll have some lovely something on the front, because Books A Million has like an amazing selection of journals, and we have one right here in my town, so I love binging on journals there. and they're just blank lined paper and in a beautiful hardcover, but I keep buying journals, half filling them, and then they get lost, or I'm using a different journal for every topic, and it was just not making sense. So anyway, when I made the 2018 Author's Journal, I included an expense section. So each month has its own section for expenses, and like I just put in the date, which is the day of the month, since each month has its own section, and I put in the description of the expense, the provider, the cost, and whether or not I've digitally logged a receipt. So that way I know that I have it all in one folder digitally, or or if I have it in my email, I can put email in there or something like that. But at least I have everything kept, everything's maintained in one spot. So at the end of the year, I don't have to try rushing through all of my old bank statements, which after a certain point you have to download. I'd rather just go through my activity summary without downloading a PDF and having to fight through it. But I don't like spending days doing that. Maybe some people are different, but see, in November, October, so I've already been updating weekly for September so I can keep better track of my expenses. And here is, of course, August. So I had quite a bit in August because I had a lot of marketing. I think my month with the most expenses though was, where was it? Oh, it was March because I ran the ATA retreat. So that had a lot of expenses, but that's the only month I've ever filled up an expense sheet because, typically we're not incurring that many expenses as an author, and I am using this for the business as well, but for my authorship too. So I just use a highlighter. You can use a highlighter to separate things if you need to. But at least I know exactly what I'm spending. I can easily stop and at the end of the year add this up, categorize it, or whatever needs to happen. But it's all in one spot. I don't lose it because, again, it's massive. It's freaking huge. And let me just show you guys what it looks like in the Ultimate Authorship Planner. Okay, let's see. Ta-da! So you just put the month up here, and then you can put your expenses in there. So the Ultimate Authorship Planner is undated, so you can start it at any time. But at least we still have expenses in there, as well as your editing section, your manuscripts. Everything you need for your authorship is right there. So anyway, but that's really what I wanted to cover with expenses. Is there's so many things I think people aren't keeping track of, and yet we need to be bringing those things to our accountants or our tax preparers and saying, hey, can I claim this or not? And if you're in the ATA, it might be a good time, we're reaching the end of the third quarter of the year. So it might be a good time to review our class on taxes for authors, which is just in the members course library under author business category. So I think the last thing I'd really like to say, I made some notes, because I love this stuff, about getting organized and systemized and really treating our authorship like a business, because that's how we're going to make money, right? So really the whole point is understand that these expenses need to be recorded. We need to be doing this bookkeeping, which is a really fancy word for just keeping financial records. And then make sure you're developing a system so you're not trying to do it all at the end of the year rather than just doing it a little bit at a time, which is really efficient because, hey, PayPal's showing all last week right here. My checking account is showing all this last week's activity right here, and so on and so forth. Whatever accounts you have, whether it's PayPal or a credit account or a credit card or a checking account or whatever you have, you can see those expenses really easily week to week and then keep track of them in one place that you don't lose. Again, if you have a journal or an Ultimate Authorship Planner, then you're ahead of the game because you're not going to lose that, baby. But anyway, so keep your records and develop a system for when you're going to sit down and go through your expenses for the past week or past month. Again, you can do it either way, but beyond that, beyond a month at a time, it gets a lot harder to do. You have to start downloading bank statements and digging into PayPal data, which is a little bit more difficult. And if you're not tech savvy, then you definitely want to avoid that. But we still want to, if you need to catch up, go ahead and catch up. I had to catch up a few months, and it did take me a lot of time. It felt like hours. I don't know if it was hours, because I've got kids and a husband, so they kept interrupting me while I was trying to do my financials. I'm like, honey, please, I can't count and listen to the kids at the same time. No, I tease. But anyway, the whole point is just try really hard to keep develop your own system for keeping track of your financials. Find one place, book or a spreadsheet. Sometimes, again, with the journals, the small hardback ones I was buying, I kept losing them, or the kids would get a hold of them and draw in them, and I'd call it a loss. Now, nice thing about this is I gave the proofs to my children, so they don't have to draw in mine. They each have their own 2018 author's journal to draw in, so they're not drawing in mine as much anymore. Sometimes they still get a hold of it and they like to write just like mommy does, but the point is, at least everything is in one space. I got the kids distracted with their own, not that you should buy your kids one, but the point being, I know I'm not going to lose this, and I know that with my situation, I just lose those hardcover journals or the kids get a hold of them. So I had to have a solution, and just having one place for my entire business, authorship, and life, because I even do my schooling and just daily life in the 2018 Authors Journal. I know, or it's undated version, the Ultimate Authorship Planner. I know that everything is right there. It's always flipped open by my computer at my writing space. So I don't have to go search for it. I don't have to hide it from the kids, you know what I mean? Because they have their own. But I want you guys to be able to keep track, have a system developed for, really good author bookkeeping. And you know what? Just write down all of your expenses, even if you don't know if you can claim it. If you do a live event, track your mileage, understand your mileage, so that you can bring that to your accountant. Have a little, a little note card, what are they? Like 3x5 note cards or whatever. Is that it? I can't remember. But I have like little note cards. If I need to write out stuff, which I will for my retreat expenses, I can write that stuff out and make sure that it's all in one space. But point is, keep track of everything you spend money on for your authorship. If you're reading books in your genre to do research on what the market likes, because this thing received 500 5-star reviews, then go ahead and write that down, and write down why you bought it, to do market research. And that way, at the end of the year, you can bring it to your accountant and say, hey, here are my expenses. And he or she can cross off what they don't think is claimable, but at least you gave them everything, okay? It's so much better than missing a really big or really important expense because you're trying to do everything at the last minute so you can get everything to your tax preparer. You don't want to do that. I think we've all done that before, and it's not any fun, and you miss things. And I don't want you to miss potentially important things that could really help you on, one, treating your authorship more like a business instead of a hobby, and two, actually getting a great, loss on, if you're hopefully making profit, but, getting those expenses claimed in the right way. So anyway, if you guys have any questions, post them. I will gladly jump back on here. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for watching this. If you're watching the replay, you can still ask questions, and we can still have a great conversation about this topic. All right, guys, I will see you later. Bye.